Kol Yisrael ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel ve'imru. Amen.
Amen. Rabbi Mel Young, who's new to our Portland Jewish community, is going to offer some reflections before we conclude. Rabbi Young.
Thank you, Rabbi Rose. In the last few months of my father's life, he would repeat the following to me, and it's a saying I cherish each day of my life. Don't tell just a story. Don't tell just the story. Don't tell just my story. Zachor, Zachor, remember, remember. Tell our story, the Jewish people's story. Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, provides that opportunity for us to remember and honor those who perished and to secure the memories of those who survived for Jewish communities to come together like we are today, and to commemorate this day through prayer, music, and narratives from our survivors. Holocaust survivors are dwindling each day. Almost 75% of the world's population today was born after World War II. Sooner rather than later, it will not be memories of what people said to other people, but rather venues for learning will be the only vessels for remembrance. Thus, it is children like me, the second generation of Holocaust survivors, along with the children of my generation, third generation legacy, who are the living links to primary testimony of Holocaust survivors. However, as we stand within the first quarter of the 21st century, there is an emerging fourth generation legacy who will not have living connections to those with witness accounts of the Holocaust. Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi, the author of Zachor, Jewish History and Jewish Memory, so accurately identifies memory as one of our most frail and unstable capacities. He points out that Zachor, meaning remember, in its various forms is mentioned no less than 169 times in the Hebrew Bible. Zachor is, more often than not, linked to Israel or God, for memory is obligatory for both. Zachor, the verb, is completed with its counterpart, forgetting. The act of recording historical events, historiography, is not the primary form of transmission through which we, the collective memory of the Jewish people, has been the focus or awakened. For Yerushalmi says, it's not just Jews who are impacted by the following common understanding. As Yerushalmi says, that what is remembered is not always recorded. And alas, for the historian, that much of what has been recorded is not necessarily remembered. When God announces to the people of Israel at Sinai, God does not focus on personal traits, but proclaims, I, the Lord, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. Given that the people of Israel know God's accomplishments in history, I wish to underscore the following. Then memory is requisite to its faith and being. As emphasized by Yerushalmi, only in Israel and nowhere else is the injunction to remember felt as a religious imperative to our entire people. We are called upon to be righteous Jews in this moment. But the demands of memory are not so simple and easy. How do we view and bring into memory the pain of others? How are we indebted to those who suffered? How do we best communicate their narratives for future generations without taking their stories from them and without making someone like me more important than someone else's recalled memory, and perhaps even having one's own recollection uprooted by their narratives? These are key questions when tackling the challenges of shaping and sustaining the memories of the Holocaust. This transmission is more than just a proverbial message being conveyed to another, but rather such communication is embedded with moral and ethical implications. I am the recipient of oral communications and photos about my family's past in the Holocaust. My mother is a 15-year-old, being part of the Kindertransport, and my paternal grandparents having sailed on the SS St. Louis. But I am not them, and would never want to usurp their experiences as shared through primary testimonies and as portrayed in images. How easy it is for me to potentially add or delete certain details to my personal observations, rooted not in oral or written personal stories or from those in photos. Group memory is conveyed more effectively through ritual rather than through written narrative. Therefore, it's not coincidental that Yizkor services and Yom HaShoah observances assume a lot more meaning than if someone were to read a narrative about the Holocaust. Jews who experience death before their eyes, who convey their dramatic stories to their children and their children's children, are comforted by a day solely dedicated to remembering the Holocaust. It allows for current generations to mourn and remember accordingly, and bring forward essential questions for today's world. How could a civilized nation impose such horror on designated groups of people? How could God not be present during this unspeakable event? This event for many contemporary Jews is too close in time for it to be merged with other historical tragedies and needs to be remembered, not only for the duty of remembrance, as underscored within the Jewish tradition, but also to be a venue for discussions, succinctly stated and emphasized by Rabbi Rose by saying, never again.
Thank you, Rabbi Young. Before I introduce Cantor Kahana in just a moment to